The crystalline spires of New Olympus pierced the clouds of the capital world, their surfaces reflecting the light of 3 suns in brilliant cascades of rainbow fire. From her office window in the Admiralty Tower, Captain Amelia Vasquez could see the endless streams of starships ascending and descending through the atmosphere, merchant vessels from 1,000 worlds, diplomatic cruisers bearing ambassadors from distant star systems, and the sleek warships of the intergalactic empire's mighty fleet. Never in the history of sentient civilization had any single power commanded such respect, such reach, such absolute dominance over the cosmos. The empire stretched across 17 galaxies, encompassing over 4 million inhabited worlds and countless species, all united under the banner of the Golden Phoenix. Trade flowed freely along hyperspace corridors that had once been impassable. Wars between species had become extinct. Disease, poverty, and ignorance were relics of a barbarous past. Amelia adjusted the collar of her midnight blue uniform, the silver star clusters on her shoulders catching the afternoon light. At 38, she was the youngest captain to command a Titan-class dreadnought, and her ship, the ISV Prometheus, was the crown jewel of the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet. Her reputation had been forged in the Spiral Nebula campaigns, where she had led relief missions to worlds devastated by stellar collapse, and later in the peaceful integration of the Centaurian collective into the Empire. The soft chime of her communication array interrupted her thoughts. Admiral Chen's weathered face materialized in the holographic display, his expression unusually grave for a man who had seen peace reign for over 2 decades. "Captain Vasquez, report to command immediately. Priority Alpha." Amelia's heart quickened. Priority Alpha had not been issued since the Magellan crisis 15 years ago. "On my way, sir." The corridors of the Admiralty Tower hummed with activity as she made her way to the command center. Officers in their crisp uniforms moved with purposeful urgency, their faces reflecting the same tension she felt building in her chest. The great blast doors of the command center parted before her with a hydraulic whisper, revealing the vast chamber beyond. The command center was the nerve center of Imperial operations, a cathedral of technology where real-time data from across 17 galaxies flowed in streams of light and sound. Holographic displays showed the positions of fleet elements, trade routes, diplomatic missions, and exploratory expeditions scattered across an impossible expanse of space. At the center of it all stood Admiral Chen, flanked by his senior staff. "Captain," Chen said without preamble, "we've received a transmission from the Andromache Galaxy. Look at this." The main display shifted, showing a star map with the familiar spiral of their home galaxy prominently featured. To the galactic northwest, separated by a relatively narrow band of dark space, hung the smaller irregular cluster of the Andromache Galaxy, one of their closest neighbors and, until recently, a friendly independent state. "The transmission came through 17 hours ago," Chen continued. "It's an SOS broadcast on all emergency frequencies." The display changed again, and suddenly the command center filled with the sound of desperate voices speaking in the musical language of the Andromedans. Amelia had studied their tongue during her diplomatic training. The words sent chills down her spine. "Systems failing, population centers under attack, unknown vessels overwhelming our defenses, request immediate assistance. Andromache Prime falling. Emperor Thalen sends greetings to the Empire and begs for aid, coordinates follow." The message dissolved into static and then repeated. "When did we last have contact with the Andromedans?" Amelia asked. 3 months ago," replied Commander Torres, the intelligence chief. "Ambassador Kellier reported normal diplomatic relations, peaceful trade negotiations, no signs of internal strife or external threats. Their military was small but adequate for their regional security needs. Unknown vessels," Admiral Chen mused, stroking his gray beard. "No one in the Andromache region has the capability to threaten their primary worlds. The Andromache Defense Fleet, while limited, should have been more than sufficient against pirates or raiders." "What are you thinking, sir?" Chen's eyes were distant, troubled. "I'm thinking about reports from our long-range reconnaissance probes. For the past 6 months, we've been getting anomalous readings from the deep dark, the void region beyond the Andromache Galaxy. Energy signatures that don't match any known technology, gravitational distortions that shouldn't exist. He called up another display showing a three-dimensional map of local galactic clusters. Beyond Andromache, stretching into the cosmic night, lay billions of light-years of seemingly empty space. But now, as Amelia looked closer, she could see the small red indicators marking probe contacts and sensor anomalies. You think something is coming out of the deep dark? I think something already has. Chin turned to face her directly. Captain Vasquez, I'm placing you in command of Task Force Mercy. You'll take your Prometheus along with the New Athens, Starfire, and Constellation, plus support vessels. Get to the Andromache Galaxy, assess the situation, and render all possible aid. Amelia felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with a new mission, but something nagged at her. Sir, for capital ships seems like a significant response to what might be a local crisis. Under normal circumstances, I would agree. But these aren't normal circumstances. Chin called up a tactical display showing ship deployments across local space. This is the extent of our forward-deployed assets in this region. The 5th and 7th Fleets are engaged in joint operations in the Canis major colonies. The 2nd Fleet is conducting goodwill missions in the Virgo cluster. You're what we have available for immediate response. Understood. When do we deploy? Immediately. Your ships are already being prepped and supplied. Captain Harrison of the New Athens will serve as your second in command. Take on supplies for an extended operation. If the Andromedans are facing some new threat, we may be there for a while. As Amelia turned to leave, Chen's voice stopped her. Captain, be careful out there. Something about this doesn't feel right. 6 hours later, Amelia stood on the bridge of the Prometheus as her magnificent ship slipped its moorings and began its stately ascent through New Olympus's atmosphere. Through the forward viewports, she could see her task force taking formation, the New Athens with its distinctive swept-wing configuration, the Starfire bristling with sensor arrays, and the Constellation showing the scars of a dozen peaceful missions to troubled worlds. All vessels reporting ready, Captain, announced her executive officer, Commander Marcus Webb. Like Amelia, Webb was a veteran of the integration campaigns, a steady presence who had served with her for over 5 years. Signal the fleet, jump when ready. Destination Andromache Prime. The bridge crew began the familiar dance of hyperspace preparation. Status reports flowed from all stations as the massive ship's consciousness awakened to interstellar travel. The artificial gravity adjusted subtly, the hull's crystalline matrix began to sing its harmonic tune, and reality itself seemed to hold its breath. Hyperspace window opening, reported the navigation officer. All ships confirm ready. Execute jump. The stars elongated into brilliant lines, and then they were elsewhere. Hyperspace travel between galaxies was an entirely different experience from the routine jumps between star systems. The journey to Andromache would take 4 days, time to analyze the limited intelligence they had and prepare for whatever they might find. Amelia had requested a full briefing on Andromache's civilization to be compiled and distributed to all senior officers. As her task force hurtled through the hyperspace conduit, she studied everything they knew about their neighbors. The Andromache Galaxy was home to 6 major species and dozens of minor ones, all unified under the benevolent rule of Emperor Thalen, a being of the dominant Andromedate species, tall, graceful humanoids with an affinity for mathematics and music. Their technology was roughly equivalent to the Empire's, though they had never developed the massive industrial infrastructure that allowed the Empire to field such enormous fleets. What troubled Amelia was how little they really knew about the region beyond Andromache. The deep dark had always been considered empty space, too far from major galactic clusters to be worth exploring, too distant for any known species to have originated there. Long-range surveys had shown nothing but the occasional rogue planet or dead star system. Yet the probe reports Chin had shown her suggested otherwise. On the 2nd day of their journey, she called a conference with her senior staff and the captains of the other vessels, their images appearing as holograms around the main briefing table. I want to discuss our tactical approach, she began. We're going in relatively blind, with limited intelligence and no recent contact with Andromache forces. Captain Harrison, what's your assessment? Captain Jonathan Harrison, a grizzled veteran whose scarred face spoke of earlier, more violent times, leaned forward in his holographic form. I don't like it, Amelia. 4 ships sounds like a lot until you realize we're jumping into a completely unknown situation. If someone has the capability to overwhelm Andromache's defenses, what makes us think we can fare better? Our ships are more advanced, offered Captain Sarah Chin of the Starfire. Andromedae technology is sophisticated, but they've never faced a serious military threat. They may have been unprepared for whatever hit them. Or, said Captain Martinez of the Constellation, whatever hit them is so far beyond our capabilities that the technological difference is irrelevant. The conference fell silent as they contemplated that possibility. All right, Amelia said finally. Here's what we're going to do. We'll exit hyperspace at the edge of the Andromache system and conduct full sensor sweeps before proceeding. If there are unknown hostiles in the area, I want to know about them before they know about us. We go in careful and ready for anything. They dropped out of hyperspace at the calculated coordinates, reality snapping back into focus with the familiar shiver that ran through every deck of the ship. Immediately, alarms began to sound. Contact! Shouted Lieutenant Commander Reyes from the sensor station. Multiple vessels, bearing everywhere, Captain. I'm reading at least 30 ships in this system. Andromedae vessels? Negative. Unknown configuration, unknown energy signatures. The main display lit up with tactical information. The Andromache system, which should have been protected by orbital defense stations and patrol craft, was crawling with strange vessels. They were oddly shaped, asymmetrical, and seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. Even their energy signatures were wrong, too dim, too cold, as if they existed at a lower temperature than the surrounding space. Where are the Andromedae forces? Amelia asked. I'm detecting wreckage in orbit around the 4th planet. That would be Andromache Prime. Large pieces, consistent with defense platforms and capital ships. Amelia felt a chill run down her spine. Any signs of life? Escape pods, survivors? Scanning, negative, Captain. If there were survivors, they're not in this system anymore. On the display, she could see the dark vessels moving in seemingly random patterns around the system. They showed no formation, no apparent coordination, yet something about their movements seemed purposeful, predatory. Captain, Commander Webb said quietly, I'm reading some very strange energy patterns from those ships. Our computers can't classify their technology. Are they aware of us? Unknown. They haven't changed course or configuration since we arrived. Amelia studied the tactical display, her mind racing through options. The mission parameters were clear: render aid to Andromache. But if the entire Andromache defense fleet had been destroyed, what could 4 Imperial ships accomplish? Signal the fleet, maintain position, and begin detailed sensor analysis of those vessels. I want to know everything: propulsion, weapons, defenses, crew complements, anything we can determine. For the next hour, they watched and studied. The dark ships continued their strange dance through the system, occasionally clustering around the larger moons of the gas giants, sometimes dispersing toward the outer planets. None approached the task force, but Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched in return. Captain, called Lieutenant Reyes, I'm picking up a transmission. It's an Imperial standard. Put it through. The bridge speakers crackled, and then a voice emerged, human, male, speaking with the accent of the core worlds. Imperial vessels, this is Admiral Marcus Dane of the Imperial battleship Leviathan. Thank God you received our signal. The situation here is worse than we reported. Amelia and Webb exchanged glances. There was no Imperial battleship Leviathan, and no Admiral Marcus Dane in the current fleet roster. Computer, identify source of transmission. Transmission originates from vessel bearing 27 Mark IV. Configuration unknown. Energy signature does not match Imperial technology. So one of the dark ships is pretending to be an Imperial vessel, Webb murmured. The transmission continued. We were part of an advance expedition to establish relations with the Andromedae when this Force emerged from the deep dark. Captain Vasquez, if that's really you, we need immediate assistance. We've been fighting a holding action for weeks. Amelia's blood ran cold. How did they know her name? Captain Harrison, she said, opening a secure channel to the task force. Are you getting this? Confirmed. Someone's been doing their homework. Recommendations? Harrison's voice was grim. It's obviously a trap. The question is what kind and how sophisticated. Before Amelia could respond, the transmission came again, but this time the voice was different, female, with the musical accent of the Andromedae. Imperial Task Force, this is Empress Calera of Andromache. I speak from our hidden refuge in the asteroid belt. Please, you must help us. The Dark Ones have taken our worlds, but many of our people survive. We've been waiting for your response to our distress call. Two contradictory stories, Webb observed. Both designed to draw us in. The tactical display updated, showing the dark vessels beginning to change their movements. Where before they had seemed random, now they were clearly forming into some kind of formation, a vast net spreading throughout the inner system. Captain, called Lieutenant Reyes. I'm reading massive energy buildups throughout the unknown fleet. Whatever they're planning, it's starting now. Amelia watched the display as the trap revealed itself. The dark ships were indeed forming a net, but not just around her task force. They were establishing positions that would block every possible escape route from the system. Hyperspace windows required specific coordinates and clear space. The enemy was methodically denying them both. Signal the fleet, battle stations. All ships prepare for immediate. The transmission came again, but now the voice was her own. Task Force Mercy, this is Captain Amelia Vasquez. The situation has stabilized and we are proceeding with relief operations. Return to base and report mission successful. The similarity was perfect. Her voice, her speech patterns, even her command style. Somewhere in the enemy fleet, something was analyzing their communications and recreating them with impossible accuracy. That's enough, she said. All ships maximum alert. Launch fighters and prepare for combat. Signal Imperial Command, Andromache fallen to unknown force. Engaging hostile fleet. Send reinforcements immediately. Captain, Webb said urgently. Hyperspace window is destabilizing. Someone's jamming our navigation array. On the display, the dark ships were accelerating toward them, their formations tightening like a closing fist. Whatever they were, wherever they had come from, they had been planning this moment carefully. All ships, evasive maneuvers. Concentrate fire on the nearest group of hostiles. Let's see what these things are made of. The Imperial Task Force moved into combat formation with the precision of long practice. The Prometheus took point, her massive bulk bristling with weapons arrays, while the other three vessels spread into a defensive screen. Fighter craft poured from their launch bays like angry insects, their pilots' voices filling the communication channels with crisp efficiency. Vampire flight launching. Raptor squadron, full spread. All birds away, all birds away. The first salvo came from the dark ships without warning, beams of energy that seemed to bend space itself, creating visible distortions in their wake. The Starfire, Captain Chen's ship, took a direct hit on her forward shields. The barriers flared and held, but the energy readings were unlike anything in Imperial databases. Return fire! Amelia commanded. The Prometheus spoke with the voice of thunder. Plasma cannons, particle beams, and guided munitions lanced out toward the approaching enemy vessels. Some found their marks, causing brief flares of exotic energy, but the dark ships seemed to absorb the damage and continue their approach undaunted. Direct hits confirmed on 3 targets, reported the weapons officer. Minimal apparent damage. The enemy responded by increasing their rate of fire. More beams lashed out across space, and this time Amelia could see what they were truly facing. The dark ships weren't just absorbing light, they were absorbing energy itself. Their hulls seemed to drink in the radiation around them, creating patches of absolute black against the star field. Captain, called the science officer. I'm reading some impossible energy states from those vessels. It's as if they're operating at a lower energy level than normal space. Explain. All matter exists at a baseline energy state. These ships appear to exist at a significantly lower state, which allows them to drain energy from their surroundings. It's like they're holes in space itself. A new group of dark ships approached from the starboard side, and Amelia watched as they passed through the fighter screen. The Imperial pilots, veterans of a dozen campaigns, performed flawlessly, but their weapons had minimal effect. Plasma charges that should have vaporized enemy fighters instead seemed to be absorbed, feeding whatever malevolent intelligence drove the dark fleet. Vampire leader to flagship, came the voice of Commander Torres, the fighter group leader. Our weapons are ineffective. Repeat, minimal damage to enemy craft. Request new orders. Before Amelia could respond, she watched in horror as one of the Imperial fighters simply stopped. The craft hung motionless in space for a moment, and then its energy signature disappeared entirely. The ship was still there, but it had gone completely dark. Vampire 7, report. Silence. Vampire 7, please respond. This is Vampire Leader. 7's not responding to any signals. His ship appears to be drained. The tactical display updated to show more fighters going dark as the enemy vessels passed near them. They weren't being destroyed. They were being emptied of all energy, leaving dead husks drifting in space. All fighters, disengage and return to base, Amelia ordered. Do not approach enemy vessels. The dark ships were now close enough for detailed sensor analysis, and what the computers revealed chilled Amelia to the bone. The vessels weren't ships in any conventional sense. They were more like organized voids, spaces where the normal laws of physics had been suspended. Inside each craft, sensors detected not crew members but rather patterns of organized darkness, as if shadow itself had gained intelligence and purpose. Captain, Webb said, his voice tight with strain, I'm reading massive energy depletion in our forward shields. Whatever those beams are doing, they're draining our defensive systems. Rotate shield frequencies. See if we can find something they can't absorb. The weapons officer looked up from his console. Captain, I have an idea. What if we don't try to destroy them? What if we try to overload them? Explain. If they absorb energy, there might be a limit to how much they can handle. We concentrate all fire on a single target, maximum yield. It was worth trying. All ships, concentrate fire on the lead vessel. Full power, all weapons. The 4 Imperial ships opened fire simultaneously, their combined fury focused on a single dark ship. Plasma, particles, and exotic matter converged on the target in a display of devastating firepower. For a moment, the enemy vessel seemed to brighten, its dark surface fluctuating as it struggled to absorb the massive energy input. Then it exploded. The detonation was unlike anything Amelia had ever seen. Instead of the usual brilliant flash, this explosion seemed to tear a hole in space itself, creating a brief window into absolute nothingness. For an instant, she thought she could see something moving in that void, vast shapes that belonged to no physical universe. One down, she said grimly. But look at the others. The remaining dark ships had changed their behavior. Where before they had approached steadily, now they moved with obvious purpose and coordination. Worse, they seemed to have learned from the destruction of their companion. Energy patterns around their hulls shifted and changed, becoming more complex, more adaptive. They're evolving, the science officer reported. Adapting their energy absorption patterns in real time. The next enemy salvo was more focused, more efficient. The beams seemed to seek out weak points in the Imperial shields, drilling through defenses with surgical precision. The Constellation took a severe hit, her port shields collapsing entirely. Constellation reporting heavy damage. Captain Martinez's voice was strained. We've lost main power to 3 decks. Casualties mounting. Amelia watched the tactical display with growing desperation. Her task force was outgunned, outmaneuvered, and facing an enemy that adapted to their tactics in real time. Worse, the hyperspace jammers were still active. There would be no retreat. Then she noticed something on the long-range sensors. Lieutenant Reyes confirmed those readings, Deep space, bearing 187 Mark 12. Confirmed, Captain? Multiple hyperspace windows opening. Large craft incoming. For a moment, hope flared in Amelia's chest. Reinforcements from Imperial Command, perhaps warned by their earlier transmission. But as the new vessels emerged from hyperspace, her hope turned to ash. They were dark ships. Dozens of them, each one larger than those already in the system. And as they moved into formation, she could see that they weren't just random attackers. They were organized, coordinated, part of something much larger than a simple raiding force. Captain, Webb said quietly, I think we've found the main fleet. The new arrivals dwarfed the vessels already in system. Where the original dark ships had been roughly equivalent to Imperial cruisers, these newcomers were the size of dreadnoughts and super-dreadnoughts. Amelia counted at least 50 of them, their massive forms blotting out stars as they moved into position. Signal from Imperial Command, reported the communications officer. They're requesting status update. Tell them. Amelia paused, watching as the dark fleet arranged itself into what was clearly a battle formation. Tell them that Task Force Mercy has encountered a hostile force of unknown origin and significant capability. We are outnumbered approximately 20 to 1 and request immediate reinforcement by all available fleet elements. Captain, Lieutenant Reyes called out. I'm detecting launch activity from the large vessels. Hundreds of smaller craft deploying. The tactical display became a constellation of red dots as fighter-sized vessels poured from the dark dreadnoughts. But these weren't fighters in any conventional sense. They moved with an organic fluidity that defied physics, shifting their configurations as they flew. All ships prepare for massive fighter assault. Amelia broadcast to her task force. Defensive formation beta. Close-range weapons to maximum. The wave of dark fighters approached like a living storm. As they drew closer, sensors revealed their true nature. They weren't mechanical constructs but rather organized patterns of void, each one a miniature version of the larger ships. They moved without regard for momentum or inertia, turning at impossible angles, accelerating and decelerating in ways that violated everything Amelia knew about physics. The first wave struck the New Athens. Captain Harrison's ship had always been known for its defensive capabilities, mounting more point defense systems than any other vessel in the fleet. But the dark fighters seemed to flow around the defensive fire like water, absorbing energy weapons and ignoring kinetic projectiles. New Athens reporting fighter penetration. Harrison's voice was tight with strain. They're not attacking the hull, they're draining our power systems directly. Through the viewports, Amelia could see the dark fighters swarming over Harrison's ship like parasites. Where they touched the hull, lights dimmed and systems failed. The New Athens was being systematically drained of all energy. All ships switched to kinetic weapons only. Disable all energy-based systems not essential for life support. It was a desperate measure. Imperial ships relied heavily on energy weapons and defensive systems. Fighting with kinetics alone was like trying to perform surgery with stone tools. But it was their only chance to avoid the energy drain that was slowly killing the New Athens. The Prometheus shuddered as her own swarm of dark fighters made contact. Through the internal sensors, Amelia could see the ship's energy reserves dropping at an alarming rate. Emergency lighting activated throughout the vessel as non-essential systems were automatically shut down. Captain, the engineering officer reported. Whatever those things are doing, they're draining power faster than our reactors can produce it. At this rate, we'll lose life support in 30 minutes. 30 minutes. Against an enemy that seemed to have unlimited numbers and capabilities beyond their understanding. What about the hyperspace jamming? She asked. Can we break through it? Negative. The jammers are distributed throughout their fleet. We need to eliminate at least a dozen of the large vessels to create a gap. Amelia studied the tactical display, her mind racing through possibilities. 12 enemy dreadnoughts, each one probably equivalent to their entire task force. It was impossible. Unless. Computer, display energy flow patterns throughout the enemy fleet. The display shifted, showing the complex web of energy exchanges between the dark vessels. They weren't just individual ships. They were nodes in a larger network, sharing power and information through some kind of exotic field effect. There, she said, pointing to a particular cluster of large vessels near the center of the formation. Those ships are acting as distribution nodes. If we could disrupt that network, it might cause a cascade failure, Webb finished. But we need to get past their entire defensive screen. Then that's what we do. Amelia opened a channel to the task force. All ships, prepare for maximum acceleration run. Target the central node cluster. Everything we have. Captain. Harrison's voice came over the comm, weaker now as his ship's power continued to drain. My vessel is at 15% power. I can give you one more good run, but that's all. Understood. Starfire Constellation, report status. Starfire operational, Captain Chim responded. Power at 60% and falling. Constellation barely hanging on, Martinez added. 20% and dropping fast. They were dying by degrees, but they still had weapons. Still had a chance. All ships, execute attack run on my mark. Target coordinates transmitting now. We go in fast, hit hard, and punch through whatever they throw at us. The 4 Imperial ships began their acceleration, building speed as they aimed for the heart of the Dark Fleet. Around them, the enemy vessels began to respond, shifting their formations to intercept. But there was something different about their movement now, a hesitation, as if they were receiving new orders. Captain, the communications officer said suddenly. I'm receiving a transmission. Source unknown, but it's an Imperial standard. Let's hear it. The voice that emerged from the speakers was human, but wrong somehow, as if someone was trying to speak while their vocal cords were made of ice. Captain Vasquez. I am what you might call the voice of the dark. We have been observing your species for some time. You interest us. Amelia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's failing environmental systems. This is Captain Vasquez of the Imperial ship Prometheus. Identify yourself and state your intentions. Our intentions? The voice carried what might have been amusement. We are collectors, Captain. Gatherers of energy, of life, of potential. Your galaxy burns so brightly. It will feed us for millennia. The Andromache galaxy. You destroyed it. We harvested it. Every star, every planet, every living being. Their energy now serves a greater purpose. The transmission continued, but now Amelia could see something on the long-range sensors that made her blood run cold. Beyond the local Dark Fleet, space itself was changing. Stars were dimming, their light being drawn into vast, organized patterns. Entire solar systems were going dark as something unimaginably vast moved through space. My God, Webb whispered. How big are they? Your empire will be next. The voice continued. But we offer you a choice, Captain Vasquez. Surrender your ships to us voluntarily, and we will make your absorption gentle. Your consciousness will become part of something far greater than your individual existence. Counteroffer, Amelia replied, her voice deadly calm. Go back to whatever hell spawned you and leave our galaxy alone. The laughter that came over the calm was like the sound of dying stars. Courage. Yes, this is why your species interests us. Very well, Captain. Show us what your courage can accomplish.